All right, thank you, Steve. Well, it's a great honor to be here to help with this presentation tonight, and it's a great honor to be with a gentleman who I think is a great American hero for his service to our country during World War II, but also, and that's what we're going to talk a lot about tonight, but also Coach Bert Jenkins is recognized as maybe the best high school basketball coach that they've ever been in the state of Mississippi. Now, I don't have this memorized, but I'm going to read you some of his quick accomplishments. Spent 12 years as a junior high coach before becoming the head basketball coach at Gulfport High School. In 28 years as the head coach at Gulfport, his team won 7 state championships, 13 Big 8 championship titles. His Gulfport teams won 866 games, only lost 180, a winning percentage of 83%. They had 3 40-win seasons, 18 30-win seasons, 25 20-win seasons. He was the National High School Coach of the Year in 65, 70, 76, and 89, which was his last year as the head coach. He was inducted into the Mississippi Association of Coaches Hall of Fame in 1981 and the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame right there about 1999. So very accomplished as a basketball coach, and that's all a part of his story that we're going to talk about tonight. Now, Coach grew up a lot of different places around Mississippi, but when he was a junior and a senior in high school, his dad was working at Mississippi State, so he went to Starkville High School. His dream was to be a basketball player at Mississippi State, but unfortunately, World War II sort of got in the way. So, Coach, start off by talking a little bit about that. That was your dream, but Uncle Sam came calling. You got drafted into the United States Army, and talk about what that was like.
Well, I went into the Army in 1943, and I still felt like I could come back and play basketball at Mississippi State. But of course, when I got injured and lost my leg in the war, that ended my dream of being a basketball player. So I did the next best thing. I became a coach. And really, I think that maybe my loss of leg helped me as a coach, because I didn't have a hobby. I didn't play golf like the other coaches did in the off season, and we just started practicing for the next year. And the boys never seemed to get tired of it, so we would practice year round, and I enjoyed it, they enjoyed it, and it helped us win games.
No question. All right, talk about that. You went to basic training and all those kinds of things. You finally were sent to England and then into Normandy, where 6 days before you landed had been the D-Day invasion. Talk about that and what was that like?
Well, we were waiting down on at Plymouth to be sent across the English Channel to Normandy, and when they sent us across, it was June 12th, which was D+6, and we hit the beach, and it was clear. There were a few vehicles that were burned out, but they had cleared out the dead, and so it was. But about a mile inland, it wasn't clear. Heavy fighting started. The very first night was quite interesting, because our lieutenant told us to dig our foxholes, because we would probably expect an artillery barrage pretty soon, and he was right. We had our first taste of combat that first night. We had about a 20-minute German artillery barrage of 88s, German 88s. And some of the guys, one guy especially that was a friend of mine, couldn't couldn't take it. He jumped up out of his foxhole and ran around screaming, and they had to tackle him and put him in a straitjacket and took him off, and I never saw him again. But I guess it was shell shock or something. I don't know what you'd call it, but I never saw him again after that. They took him back probably to a hospital.
That had to be kind of a scary situation. I mean, old country boy from Mississippi, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of the Great World War. What were your feelings when you got there? I mean, what was going through your mind?
Just scared to death all the time. I never remember not being afraid. And I was not a gung ho soldier, John. If the lieutenant said there's a machine gun nest, a German machine gun nest, and we need volunteers to go knock it out, I didn't volunteer. I did what I was told, but I didn't do the extra that you had to do to be a gung ho soldier. But my goal was to get back home safely, and I got back. I didn't get back totally as I'd like to have, but I got back home alive, and it's what my goal was, and so I achieved that.
Now, you got there in June, so you started to move across France and towards Germany, and then you got caught up in the Battle of the Bulge in January of 1945, and that's when you suffered your injury. Talk about being there in that one of those battles of you're right there, I think, on the French-German border, right?
Well, yes, and actually we weren't in the Battle of the Bulge. They called Patton's army up, Third Army up, to relieve those at Bastogne that were surrounded by the Germans. And when he left with his Third Army, it left us pretty thin, and the Germans realized it, and they counterattacked on us and were tearing us up pretty bad, and we got orders to pull back to the next town back from us, and I'd made one of the worst mistakes I've ever made, and stupid mistakes. I was getting on the truck that pulled the anti-tank gun, and I realized I had left my mess kit. So I ran back to get my mess kit instead of staying on the truck, and because the mess kit wasn't valuable as my life was. But I ran back to get my mess kit, like as stupid as it was, and by the time I got it and was going back to the truck, a German tank came around the corner and fired and got 3 of us, and two of the others didn't move, so I presume they were dead. And I had enough gumption to get out of the street. I knew the street was a dangerous place to be, so there was a little French church right off the street, and I crawled to the church. I couldn't walk, of course, but I crawled to the church and used the church sort of as a pressure and cold for my back, because I was shot in the back.
Because it was cold and snowing and all that, right?
Yeah, there was 2 feet of snow. It was January 5th, and it was the hardest winter they'd had in France in 50 years, they said. But I put an tourniquet, excuse me. Put a tourniquet on my leg, stop the bleeding, but I couldn't do anything about my back. So, except I thought if I pressed my back up against that wall of that church, it was cold, it would stop the bleeding, and it worked. It stopped the bleeding pretty well in my back. But I was there then for about 15 minutes, and a German squad came through and found me, and that's how I got captured.
And you thought when they came that was going to be it, right? You thought they were going to shoot you and get it over with.
Well,
right?
I thought that they couldn't take me with them, and they couldn't send me back. So there wasn't anything to do, I thought, but just to shoot me, and that'd solve their problem. And in addition to that, about 2 weeks before that, I had done a foolish thing. I had come upon a dead German, and he was a Hitler Youth, and he had a Hitler Youth pin on his jacket. And I thought it'd be cool to wear that pin back in front of my buddies. And so I took it off of the dead German, and I pinned it on my own jacket with the plan, if I got in a tight spot, I was going to get rid of it. Well, I got in a tight spot, and I forgot about it. And one of the Germans spotted that pin on my jacket, that Hitler Youth pin, and they got very mad by the tone of their voice, and I felt like, well, this is it. They're not going to let me survive now.
So they were speaking German, but you knew from the way they were talking it wasn't good, right?
Right. I couldn't understand the words, but I could understand the tone of their voices. And I did hear right behind me, I heard a burp gun go burp, and I thought, well, that's me. But I wasn't dead. And so I looked around and saw that they had not shot me, but had shot the lock off of the little church. And 2 Germans picked me up out of the snow and carried me in the church and put me down in there to get me out of the weather, and actually probably saved my life.
Shortly thereafter, another group of Germans came along, and they eventually took you to a German field hospital, right, where there was you, the one American, and about 30 Germans, right? Tell a little bit about that story.
Well, we were in a ward with about, as you said, about 30 German wounded, and I was the only American in there. And at that time, the Americans came over and didn't bomb the hospital, but it bombed it so close that the windows cracked, and it was scary, and the Germans thought they were bombing the hospital, so they were, if they were able to, they were crawling out of their beds and getting under it. I wasn't afraid because I knew it was Americans, and I knew they wasn't going to be bombing a hospital. But the Germans didn't know that, and so when the bombing got over, the Germans began to give me some pretty dirty looks, and the nurses spotted it. The German nurses, and they thought they better take me out of there. Something bad might happen to me, so they took me upstairs to an attic, to a room sort of like a closet, just big enough for the bed I was in, and assigned a little girl, like equivalent to our candy stripers, probably of what we have, and that little girl was assigned to take care of me, and I began to. Let me tell the story about it.
Yeah.
Well, I began to beg her for water because I was just wanting water so bad that I couldn't. That felt like I couldn't live if I didn't have water. And she said that the Americans had bombed their waterworks, and there wasn't any water. That the Germans didn't even have water. Well, I kept begging, and eventually she left, and she came back in a few minutes and put her finger up to her mouth like that and reached under her blouse and took out a little bottle about size, it's smaller than a Coke bottle, full of water. And I knew she had taken a chance to bring me that water because the Germans weren't even allowed to drink water. They didn't have water. But she told me, gave me the signal, and came over and handed me the water bottle. Actually, she raised my sheet up and stuck it under my sheet, and then she did that again and left. And I felt like that water was just the best thing I'd ever tasted, and I made it last about 3 days.
Well, then after that, after I think you call her your little angel, that after she had helped you there, you wound up, I guess, in Germany in a prisoner of war camp.
Yeah.
Where now you still got your leg is still injured, and they tell you that something's got to happen because they can't leave the leg the way it is, right?
Yes, infection was spreading from below the knee where I was hit, and it spread up through the knee into the thigh. And the only way they could take care of it was to amputate up above the infection. They didn't have penicillin or anything to fight infection. So that's the way they did. They amputated the limb above the infection and hoped that would take care of it. And fortunately for me, it took care of it. It stopped the infection.
Now there was an American doctor there, but you said he was a general practitioner, not a surgeon. It was a German surgeon that did that.
Yeah.
And tell them what happened when you woke up. They put you under, I guess, with ether or something, but you woke up during the operation, right?
Yes, they used ether, I think, because it was a mask that they put over my nose, and I went to sleep, but I woke up pretty soon after it, right in the middle of the surgery, and I was in extreme pain, and so I started cussing, and I hung a few bad words around on the walls, I'm sure, but anyway, they got the ether back and put it back on me and put me back to sleep after I let them know I needed it.
Now, it's even after the operation, there's no guarantee that you're going to live, right? Because they don't really know for a few days whether or not the operation's been successful, right?
I asked the American doctor if I was going to survive, and he told me that we would know in about 48 hours, probably. But after that, John, something happened to my memory, and I don't remember anything from that. About a day or two after the surgery, I don't remember anything that happened for about the next 2.5 months. And I wake up and I'm in a American hospital in Nancy, France. And the war's over in Europe, and some outfit has come through our camp where we were staying, where they had us, and they took care of us and took us back to an American hospital, and that's when I sort of came to and started remembering. And I've asked doctors, why did I lose that memory for 2.5 months? And they said it was probably nature's way of taking care of the trauma and the pain and all. They didn't have pain medication. They didn't have anything like that, and so it must have been pretty extreme pain, it was probably nature's way of taking care of it.
So even today, you don't that operation happened like I think maybe early February. The Germans surrendered in May. So that whole time, even today, you don't remember a whole lot that went on in that prison camp.
Don't remember anything that happened after the surgery. I remember things happened. It was about a month that I was in there before they did the amputation, and I remember some things that happened before that. But after it, just about one day is all I remember. And I remember just 2 or 3 incidents, and that's the limit.
I know I asked you about this. I know your parents back in Mississippi and your family really had no idea what had happened. They hadn't heard from you in a while. I think you told me they got a telegram that said you were missing in action, but other than that, they didn't know anything that was going on. But you had written some letters back to your parents and to some family, but your parents hadn't gotten the letter.
Yeah, I wrote from the POW camp. I was in Stalag 7B. That was the name of the German POW camp, and I wrote letters from that camp, but the majority of them didn't ever get through back to home. I wrote my parents and told them that I'd lost my leg, and they didn't get that letter. But I wrote my granddaughter, who was my favorite little granddaughter, and I was joke with her, and I said, "Are you still gonna love your old one-legged granddaddy?" And she took the letter and crossed to where my parents were and showed them the letter, and that's how they found out that I lost my leg.
Now, when you got back finally to the States, you had another little operation, I guess, in Atlanta or somewhere over there before you came back to Mississippi, right? To sort of fix up what the German surgeons had done.
Yes, they did several revisions on my surgery, on my original surgery, and fixed me up with a prosthesis, and even discharged me from Army, all from Atlanta. And at that time, my parents had moved out to Pike County, and I went to stay with them and waited for the semester to start at USM.
I mean, a lot of guys, your story is probably not unusual. A lot of guys had injuries during the war. And some guys would just sort of disappear and not want to do anything. What made you sort of tell yourself, I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm going to keep continuing on, and I'm going to get well, and I'm going to do things in life?
I don't know what caused me to take that route, but it just seemed like that would be the best thing to do. I certainly didn't want to crawl in a hole and not do anything. I wanted to make something out of my life if I could, and so best thing I could do would be a school teacher and a coach.
And touched thousands and thousands of young men and young women during your teaching and coaching career.
40 years of teaching and coaching.
And if I remember right, you were in English. You went and got your degree in English from Southern, and then a master's at Alabama, and then taught English even while you were coaching. Nowadays, coaches may teach one class and then coach ball. You taught 5 classes of English virtually every day of your teaching career, right?
Yeah, I taught 5 classes of English, around 1,500 students a day, and coached football, and in junior high I coached everything, football and basketball and track. And then I got to high school, and I was assistant football coach and head basketball coach And after 5 years, I got out of football altogether and coached just basketball along with my teaching. But the teaching was always the same. It was always 5 or 6 classes a day, and 30 in a classroom. So it was
It's a lot of students.
a lot of students.
In a minute, I'm going to let you read a couple of things to the folks, but I want to, real quick, from 1945, when your injury occurred, till 1995, which coincided with the 50th anniversary of approximately of D-Day, you sort of blocked all this out, all that had happened to you, the injury, the time in the POW camp. You sort of blocked that out of your mind. What changed that when 1995 sort of rolled around?
Well, the D-Day, the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of D-Day, had all you could see on TV was D-Day, and something happened in my brain. I don't know what it was, but suddenly I went from not wanting to know anything and leaving the room if something in the war came on. I'd get up and leave the room. I went from there to wanting to find out everything I could about what had happened to me and about World War II. And I don't know why it happened, but something happened in my brain that caused that.
And one thing you did was you went back over to France, to Normandy, and sort of saw some of the places that you used to be.
My wife and I went back and saw a lot of the places we'd been, and the word I was trying to think of the other day, and I remembered it, was we went through these hedgerows,
right,
where they had the sunken roads and high earth mounds on each side, and they were very much like they were 50 years and 60 years before that. They hadn't changed much. And so I saw it just about, they had preserved it pretty much. The cemetery had about 5,000 crosses in it, all American dead, and it was quite interesting to go back. A little emotional too at times.
I was going to say, and you had some of the French people came up and wanted to know if you were in World War II, and when they found out you were, said basically, "Thank you for my freedom."
Well, that did happen. We were thanked. The French were quite thankful for what the Americans had done, because the Americans and along with the British and Canadians had saved them from being probably in a slave culture under the Germans.
I'm going to let Coach read a couple of these things about his time there, and then let you ask some questions if you've got them. These are a couple of poems that you wrote after the fact, or while you were, this was after, thinking back, right?
Many, long time afterwards. My wife was my inspiration. She for some reason made me want to become a poet along with my other things. And so I wrote some poems to her, some love poems, which I'm certainly not going to read to you. But I wrote a couple of poems that might be interesting. One was concerning the little girl that gave me the water bottle and water, and I called it an act of kindness. It happened many years ago in a hospital far away. A sweet young girl befriended me on that cold day. Our planes had flattened her whole town. They somehow let the hospital stand. And though her home was sure in ruins, she stroked my hand. She took a very serious chance and brought me water, quenched my thirst. for drinking water then was scarce. My heart near burst. In that small room, she bathed my head and cooled my fever, smoothed my hair. I was her enemy, but then she didn't care. She turned and left me with a smile and told me not to be upset. If she's alive, she won't recall. I'll not forget. And then another poem I wrote that might be interesting was one of the.
Hold that one for you.
One of the times I was, something's wrong with this thing. It's not working.
Get it? Let's see if we try it now.
Testing. I was afraid all the time I was over there. I don't remember a day where I wasn't afraid, but I was, and this was just one time when we had to attack the Germans and had to go through an open field to do it, and the Germans had a pretty good field of fire that they could take us out as we moved forward. Anyway, I call this one fear. Unending fear was gnawing at my gut as I was lying in the wet foxhole, pinned down as enemies' barrages cut into the trees above and racked my soul. 2 days I lay and watched with growing awe as those 2 German corpses swelled and stunk. The gray-white flesh was bloated, and the jaws had swelled so that the helmet straps were sunk in out of sight. I forced myself to eat, but not to sleep. The fear was much too great. The terror crouching, waiting for the sheet of shrapnel from the German 88. The fear of dying young before the chance would come to realize some of my dreams. Obsessive dread and sorry circumstance. It made me vomit, but I choked my screams. The fear was most intense when the time came for us to move, attack the German line. I had to force my legs to move my frame with the bazooka slung across my spine. The foxhole looked so good as we moved out, that awful feeling tearing at my chest. My bladder emptied then. I heard the shout, "Let's go." I charged. My God, I passed the test.
That's good. Coach is going to be, I guess he might be telling, in November, he'll be 90 years old, right? 90 years old. And, Coach, let's see if anybody's got a few questions. I want to ask you one more, though. What you, as terrible as it was, that experience during war, how did that sort of maybe prepare you for what you would face and the way you sort of maybe treated the young students and student athletes and young men and women that you taught over the years? Did it have an effect on you?
Well, yes, it did. It had. I had admiration for those kids with courage, and it took courage to be an athlete. And I was working with them, and I was very I admired those kids tremendously. But actually, the injury and the amputation to my leg probably made me a better coach, because I didn't have any hobbies other guys, other coaches, when the season was over, they'd hit the golf course maybe. I couldn't play golf. I couldn't do anything that the others were doing. And so I started practicing for the next year. Always a few kids that would love to get on the court and practice. You'd have to fight them away from that gym door. They would break it in. If you wouldn't let them in, they'd break in. They loved to play. And so I think that the injury probably made me a better coach.
Does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask Coach Jenkins?
I don't know if I missed it. Was he married at the time that he was in the service?
No. You were not married when you were in the military, right?
No.
In the service.
I was 18.
So when did you get married?
I got married when I got out of college and went to work at Gulfport.
Anybody else?
This is my second marriage. My first marriage, she died. This is my second marriage. Been married 35 years. Most wonderful 35 years of my life.
And that's Miss Lil, right? That's Miss Jenkins right there.
Yeah, right.
All right.
She's my angel.
Who was the best ball ed player you coached at Gulfport?
Well, I had a player, the best all-around player that I ever coached was a player that went on and played at Mississippi State named Bert Jenkins. Not any kin to me. He was a young black guy. And he was an all-around great player. The best offensive player that could do just anything with the ball was Chris Jackson that got a scholarship to LSU and then went on and played 9 years in the NBA.
And you told me yesterday, you're a lot of the guys you played for. I mean, a lot of them still come to visit you, right? I mean, you had an impact on those guys, and they still come and want to talk basketball and tell stories with you even today.
Yeah, I had it about a couple of weeks ago. I had about 5 come by and visit, and I always enjoy the old guys coming back because they are a lot better than they were then.
Any other questions about his experience there back there?
You had mentioned
Go
to
ahead.
me about him telling you about his first thoughts when he first got hit.
Yeah, tell that. You told me that, and you mentioned a little earlier that your goal was to get back and be alive. And you said when you got hit, the first thing that kind of went through your mind was, well, the fighting's over. I'm either gonna, the Germans are gonna get me, or I'm gonna die, or I'm going home. But the fighting's kind of over.
It was a relief. It was a feeling of relief. That was the feeling I had, a feeling of relief. I knew the war was over for me. I wasn't going to be afraid anymore, and I might not get back alive, but at least I wasn't going to have that every day of my life being afraid.
Anybody else? Time for a few more questions.
Do you have any hard feelings against the German people?
Absolutely not. They treated me very well. The Germans were wonderful to me. They pulled me up out of the snow and put me in the church and saved my life there. And the German surgeon that amputated my leg saved my life there. It was I just have nothing but good feeling for the Germans.
Have you had a chance to either through reunions or anything, to meet some of the guys that were in that unit with you or that regiment with you?
Not any of the. Yes, I thought at first you were talking about did I meet any of the Germans, but no. I met a young guy from Prentice up here that was our medic. His name was Tootie Polk. Some of you may have known him. Tootie Polk. And he was our medic, and Lil, my wife, and I went to see him probably in 2000 or 2001 or 2. And he was carrying a what do you call that, Lil? Oxygen thing around. He had emphysema real bad. He had been a smoker, and he had emphysema, and he was carrying that around and having a hard time breathing. And we visited him, and about 2 months after we had got back home, his daughter, who worked at Pearl River Junior College, I think she taught there, called us and told us that her father, Tootie, had committed suicide. He was just got so depressed over his fighting for every breath he was taking. He just couldn't keep it up.
You told me too, I mean when this happened, that you ran across maybe later on one of the guys that had been getting on that truck to get out of there, and you asked him something like, "Why did you leave me here?" And his answer was, "We're getting out of there." You know.
Yeah, I asked Tootie when we went to see him. I said, "Why didn't you do like they do in the movies and run back and get me, sling me over your shoulder and run?" And he said, when the lieutenant was hollering at the truck driver to go, said he wasn't about to stop and go back and get anybody because that tank would get him too.
Any more questions? Well, Coach, we want to thank you for your great service to our country. You know, you endured a lot of things over there, but you came back and became a great man and had a great effect on the kids of Mississippi through your teaching and your coaching. So thanks for spending some time with us tonight and sharing your story. It's a great story. It's an inspirational story, and one I know we'll all carry with us.
It was my pleasure.
And I know before you leave tonight, if you would come up, introduce yourself to Coach and say hello. And, you know, he might have coached against you at some point when you were playing or something. But on behalf of both of us, thank you very much for your...
By the way, Sumrall beat us twice. Twice.
When was that?
No, I'm sorry. Bassfield was the team that beat us twice. Wyatt Tullis was the coach.
Wyatt Tullis, yeah. But they did. Not many people beat him. So if somebody beat him, that was a pretty good accomplishment.
Beat us twice.
But thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for listening to Coach's story. And again, come up and say hello to him. And if you would, thank him for all he's done for the state of Mississippi and for our country. Coach, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.